at that time, we're out of Washington, D.C. And I was a regional information officer as well. We had Western region cover different states within the country. We dealt with issues as it relates to blacks in law enforcement, as it relates to open mobility and things of those nature.
Well, as part of your position, you managed 30 to 40,000 members. Members nationwide, true?
That is correct.
And wasn't one of your accomplishments at the Los Angeles Police Department the creation of a domestic violence program?
It was.
Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. When I was working one of the divisions I was assigned to, I was working crimes, and I looked at the number of cases, I initiated this study. I looked at the number of cases that came through our unit, and I found that 60% of the unit of the cases that came through crimes against persons was domestic violence related. Now, crimes against persons cases are your attempted murder cases, your assault cases, and your domestic violence cases in those days. I wrote a recommendation up to the chain of command requesting requesting a reorganization of the department as it relates to the detective functions, where we had a singular focus on that. Through the bureaucracy, it took about 3 or 4 years to get that done. And under Chief Williams, he thought it was a good idea, and he bought into my program. I was responsible of managing the pilot program for that department at that time. And under his leadership, we reorganized the detective function where it had a singular focus on domestic violence, which that program is in place today. That was in about 1994, I believe it was.
And as part of your creation of this pilot domestic violence program for the LAPD, did you develop a familiarity with the proper protocol in investing a domestic violence complaint?
Yes, I worked very closely with the city attorney, the district attorney, and I was the chairperson of the judicial panel that dealt with issues of domestic violence issues. We developed a lot of protocols through the city attorney's office, district attorney's office, that impacted on how cases were presented to the district attorney's office for filing. And we had training from physicians as it relates to injuries, as it relates in domestic violence, and those protocols were in place then as well as today.
And over your course of nearly 30 years with the LAPD, did you ever engage in any training of police officers?
As a supervisor, you're always training individuals. At the academy level, I taught one class, and that was dealing with six-pack or photographic identification. And I taught detectives and vice personnel as related to those type of investigations.
And during your 30-year career with the LAPD, did you also have occasion to collaborate with confidential informants?
During my career in the detective functions, being a detective, you have confidential informants from time to time. And I believe in my career I may have had anywhere from 3 to 5 informants that I worked on during that time.
And you're from California, but you're in Florida. Is there a difference in proper police practices nationwide with law enforcement?
My focus on law enforcement is not just LAPD. The procedural aspects are nationwide. Law enforcement agencies across the country adhere to the same policies. Procedures may be different from agency to agency, but the policies are pretty much the same.
One of the policies that we're going to talk about briefly is the collection and retention and preservation of evidence during an undercover sting operation. And my question to you is, would the protocol for law enforcement to follow be nationwide on that issue?
Yes.
And you've been personally involved in undercover operations, correct?
I have been involved in undercover operations, yes.
And have you ever worked with me on a case before?
No, I have not.
And you've testified in court before, correct?
I have.
Both state and federal court.
Yes, I'm an expert in both state and federal court as it relates to police procedures and use of force issues.
And can you estimate for us about how many times you've actually come in and testified in court?
If I could look at my notes on that, Your Honor.
You may refresh your recollection.
Since in my practice, I've testified 163 times, both in trial and deposition as it relates to police procedure and use of force issues.
Now, I asked you to review some materials related to the Boynton Beach Police Department investigation of Dalia Dippolito. True?
That is correct.
Okay. Can you tell the jury what information you reviewed in this case?
So I reviewed some police reports and I reviewed some policies and procedures as it relates to confidential informants.
You recall reading the deposition of Mohammed Shahade?
I have.
Okay. Frank Ranzi?
Yes.
Alex Marino?
Yes.
Okay, now I'm going to ask you a few questions hypothetically, so I want you to assume the truthfulness of the information I'm giving you. In this case, I want you to assume that the truthfulness of Mohammed Shahade testifying that Alex Marino told him that it was guaranteed that he would remain anonymous in this undercover investigation. Are you with me?
I'm with you.
All right, so I want you to assume that truthfully. Do you have are you critical of that comment by Mr. Marino, Detective Marino, if truthful?
As it relates to being a confidential informant?
Yes.
You cannot make that promise. You let them know that you will do your best for them to be confidential. A lot of times when you go to court, if the case goes to court based upon their activity in the case, they have what you call in-camera hearings where both sides will go in, or they will have a hearing with the judge in chambers, and the judge will make a determination if in fact that person will be, that confidential informant will be testifying in trial. If it's critical, and I've seen it happen before where confidential informants do testify in trial, but as a detective or a person in charge of that or managing that informant, you cannot tell them that they will not. You would tell them that you will do your best not for that to happen, but it can be a possibility where they may be testifying in trial.
And should Detective Marino have sat down with Mohammed Shahade and explained to him the content of the confidential informant packet?
Yes. One of the things that is in those documents is what I just got through testifying to, and it relates to the issue of confidentiality and the possibility that that person may or may not be testifying in court. You do your best, you being the detective or the manager of that informant, you do your best to keep them out of court, but again, it's for the court to make that determination.
But do you believe it's important for the supervising detective to explain all elements of the confidential informant packet?
It is. I'm sorry.
So that the confidential informant understands what he or she is signing?
That is correct. It's important.
Why is that important?
Well, they need to know what they're getting involved with and the possibility that they can. And again, a lot of those confidential informant files are vetted by the attorneys for the respective agencies, city attorney if it's a county facility, of county agencies, county council, and to make sure that certain things are adhered to. Also, if anything may happen, if you didn't advise the person, then you get into risk management issues. When I say risk management issues, you may cause the municipality or the county to be subject to a lawsuit.
Now, I want you to assume that the first phone call that Mohammed Shahade makes to the Boynton Beach Police Department, he conveys to the intake person at the police department that this involves a domestic abuse allegation as well. With that fact assumed truthful, what should the Boynton Beach Police Department have done at that point in time?
Well, at that time, they should have investigated the issue of the domestic violence to see if there was any validity to it at that time.
So if it's proved truthful in this case that the Boynton Beach PD made no investigation of the domestic violence claim, would you be critical of that?
Yes, I would be critical. They should have made an investigation on that aspect.
Okay, well, can you tell the jury what specifically Boynton Beach PD should have done when they received that phone call, initial phone call from Mohammed Shahade?
Well, if there was an issue of domestic violence, I would have talked to Mohammed Shahade specifically as to what he knew about it. Then I would have had a uniform officer go out and see if there was, once I located this individual, make a police report and cause an investigation to be started in that particular vein. If it was something that needed immediate detective attention, I would have caused a detective to go out who had a background in domestic violence to go out there and take a police report and initiate or start the investigation from there.
Well, shouldn't Boynton Beach PD have contacted the victim?
Yes.
And why would you want the law enforcement to contact the alleged victim of the domestic abuse?
There is one thing that's important. You have to corroborate. In other words, you have to confirm the allegation that's been presented to you. If you do nothing and that person gets injured or hurt, then you have problems. So you have to go out there and corroborate the facts, the issues, the allegation that came to the police department. And if they prove to be correct, then you take the proper investigative procedures from there.
Now, I want you to assume as truthful that Mr. Shahade told Detective Marino that he did not want to be involved in any undercover operation. What do you believe would have been the appropriate protocol for the Boynton Beach PD to do at that time?
Well, if you have an informant that doesn't want to be involved, you don't make him be involved, him or her being involved in this investigation. If you have forms that you filled out, then you withdraw that person's name from the confidential informant file, and you may want to categorize it as unreliable or whatever the criteria is for that respective agency, and get that person out of circulation as it relates to a confidential informant, and not get them involved in your investigation.
Right, the confidential informant should have been removed, correct?
Correct.
From the investigation, correct?
Correct.
And I want you to assume as truthful that either Alex Marino, Detective Marino, or another Boynton Beach police detective or supervisor threatened Mohammed Shahade with prosecution unless he continued on the undercover operation. Would you have a problem with that?
Yes.
And why?
Well, number one, you don't coerce anyone to be involved in an investigation, to make a statement or anything else, because anything that results from that could be and maybe it will be tainted. The thing is that if a person doesn't want to be involved in that situation, then you pull him or her out, then you conduct your own investigation independent of that informant.
I mean, would assume it's truthful that former Sergeant Frank Ramsey testified that it was illegal for a police officer to threaten to prosecute an undercover, a confidential informant. Would you agree with that?
I would agree with that.
And just so I'm clear then, evidence you obtain after that could be tainted?
Yes. In my opinion, yes.
And what do you mean by tainted? Are you talking about the integrity of the investigation?
Well, if you have a person that doesn't want to be involved and you force them to be involved, then they will have a tendency to tell you what you want to hear. And then it was subject, once it gets to court, if it gets that far, then the defense attorney would enjoy the hearing that, in the fact that it puts holes in your case as it relates to your investigation. The thing is that you don't coerce anyone to do anything. You don't coerce them to make a statement. You don't coerce them to be involved in your investigation if they don't want to be involved. You pull them out, you conduct your investigation independent of them.
Now I want you to assume as truthful that either Mohammed Shahade or Witty John initiated all the phone calls to Dalia Dippolito to set up meetings with her. Would you have a problem with that?
Well, the phone calls, I would have a problem with law enforcement initiating that type of contact in that you may be putting ideas in individuals' mind that perhaps would not be there. The thing, all the contact should be initiated via the defendant or whoever was involved in the crime.
Let's talk a little bit about recording conversations between the confidential informant and the suspect. So in this case, we're talking about Mohammed Shahade and Dalia Dippolito. Are you with me?
All right.
All right. Now, isn't it true that each and every conversation between the confidential informant and the suspect should be recorded?
That is correct.
Okay. And if it's proved truthful in this case that there were multiple conversations that took place between Mohammed Shahade and Dalia Dippolito that were either not recorded or we don't have the audio for those, would you have a problem with that?
I would.
And why would you be critical of that?
They all should be recorded. You don't want to get in the position where you have an investigation where somebody would say, well, the police told me to say this, the police told me to say that. The thing is that everything that comes through, and the detectives should have instructed the informant that if the defendant called, then you would record that call. If the defendant was, not the defendant, but if the informant was at the police station, when the calls came in, you would instruct him what to do as far as what should be said, and those calls as well should be recorded.
Well, there's two types of phone calls. Maybe you could explain to the jury. There's a controlled phone call, right?
There is a controlled phone call, yes.
And that, I want you to assume as truthful in this case that there were many phone calls that were controlled phone calls between Shahade and Dalia Dippolito that took place in the Boynton Beach Police Department. Are you with me?
I'm with you.
Okay, so assuming that fact as truthful, there would be no excuse for Boynton Beach P to have recorded those phone calls, right?
It should have been recorded.
They should have recorded each and every phone call, right?
Every call that came through should have been recorded.
So if there were, or each and every phone call initiated by Mohammed Shahade to Dalia Dippolito, correct?
If he's initiated phone calls, they should have been recorded.
And again, why do you want that phone call between Mohammed Shahade and Dalia Dippolito recorded?
Well, I want to make sure I, as a lead detective, or even the state's attorney, would want to know to make sure that the information that the informant or the discussion that they're having, nothing is being put into the defendant or the suspect's mind to do something that they didn't have any intentions on doing. So that is important. In fact, the state's attorney's involvement in a case like this is very, very critical from the very beginning.
You said the state attorney?
Yes.
Why do you believe that the state attorney's involvement might have been necessary in this investigation?
Anytime you deal with very complicated or potentially high-profile cases, and this type of case is nothing. It's not ordinarily. You would not ordinarily see this type of investigation. The first contact, once the information was gleaned, the detective should have contacted the state's attorney, get him or her involved from the very beginning. Involved in the case. That way you're giving legal direction on that, and when the case does come to court, you won't have any issue as it relates to what should have been done and what shouldn't have been done, because you have an attorney that's involved and getting that direction from the very beginning.
And isn't it important to have phone calls recorded between the CI, the confidential informant, and the suspect, because it eliminates any speculation as to what was discussed?
That is correct.
And do you have an opinion as to whether members of the Boynton Beach Police Department had an affirmative duty to ensure that all phone calls between Mohammed Shahade and Dalia Dippolito were recorded?
They did.
And do you have an opinion as to whether the Boynton Beach Police Department had an affirmative duty to turn over all those audio recordings to the state attorney?
They did.
So in your opinion, if there were 30 controlled phone calls between Mohammed Shahade and Dalia Dippolito, we should have 30 audio recordings, correct?
Those 30 phone calls should have been turned over to the state's attorneys, who then should have turned them over to the defense.
Right, but my question was, if there were 20 to 30 controlled phone calls, which means they took place at the police station, between Shahade and Dalia Dippolito, we should have 20 to 30 audio recordings, correct?
Correct.
Let's talk now a little bit about uncontrolled phone calls. And by that I mean where Shahade is off on his own and he's making phone calls to Dalia Dippolito. Are you with me?
I'm with you.
All right, so based on your 30 years of experience as a senior detective with the LAPD, weren't there measures that Boynton Beach PD could have undertaken to ensure the integrity and the preservation of the content of these uncontrolled phone calls?
Yes, it's been my practice, not only my practice, but practice of those who deal with these type of investigations, in that you would instruct the person who's going to be receiving these phone calls on what to do, how to record it. You will leave a recording device with them. You would also have a log as to the date and times these calls come through. They would write that stuff down as well, and then you would monitor that and manage that from time to time. Not from time to time, you would manage it on an aggressive manner. That individual's doing what you have directed them to do.
And that's called, that's part of controlling an informant, right?
Not only control it, but you're managing the investigation as well.
Well, who's supposed to be managing the investigation?
The lead detective and everyone involved in that case, they should have their part in the management of that investigation. Everyone has a part to do. There's obviously one person that's lead, and he or she should make sure that all those T's are crossed and all those I's are dotted.
When you allow, I'm sorry, let me withdraw. When a detective such as Alex Marino encourages a confidential informant such as Mohammed Shahade to initiate phone calls to Dalia Dippolito to set up a meeting, does that jeopardize the police department losing control of the informant?
I would have a problem of asking an informant to initiate something in that arena. My thinking is that you should wait for the information to come in and you act upon the information. You don't instigate a process or things to happen which wouldn't be in the mind of the alleged defender or suspect in that particular case.
Right. Well, that could lead to the police department escalating a situation instead of diffusing it. True?
Not only escalating a situation, but it could cause a situation to happen, which wouldn't normally happen if that wasn't initiated by the police department.
And you mentioned documenting phone calls as well. There should have been a log, a phone log maintained by Boynton Beach PD for each and every phone call made by Mohammed Shahade to Dalia Dippolito, true?
Date and time, yes.
Why do you want to have that?
It's important. You may get to court and the person may say, well, I didn't do this, I didn't do that. Well, you have documentation what was done during that date and time.
Have you seen any evidence in this case of a Boynton Beach PD phone log documenting all phone calls between Mohammed Shahade and Dalia Dippolito?
I have not.
So I want you to assume as truthful that there is no phone log in existence authored by anybody at Boynton Beach PD that documents phone calls between Shahade and Dippolito. Would you be critical of that?
Yes.
And I want you to assume as truthful a comment made by Mohammed Shahade. He indicated at trial, and again I want you to just assume for purposes of this question that it's truthful, that Detective Alex Marino said that there was a 72-hour window in which he needed to contact Dippolito and get her on videotape. If that's truthful, would you have a problem with this self-imposed 72-hour mandate?
I would.
And why so?
You don't put a time frame on an investigation. The investigation takes its own time frame as it unfolds. Sometimes you may work days on a case. Sometimes you may work minutes on a case. You just take the case dictates the time that it's going to take an investigator or investigators to do its work.
I want you to assume it's truthful that the Cops television show was arriving at Boynton Beach PD on August 4th to do filming. Would you be critical of the Cops television show filming any portion, without mentioning what portion, any portion of the undercover investigation of Dalia Dippolito?
I will be critical of doing any coverage on any aspect of this investigation.
Why so?
Because this is a very serious investigation. It could be a very dangerous investigation. You don't know what's going to happen. You don't wait for things to happen. You conduct your investigation. If you have violations, then you cause arrests to be made. You don't do things on cue. You do things as they unfold. And if you're doing it for television, then perhaps you're in the wrong line of work.
I want you to assume as truthful that Mohammed Shahade had a previous intimate relationship with Dalia Dippolito in the undercover investigation.
Well, that's an important piece of information to know.
Okay, why so?
Well, it would, number one, it would, the first thing that comes to my mind as a detective is this person telling me this piece of information based upon them being jilted in this affair. What's the motivation for doing this? And I would sit down and I would have those types of discussions with the informant.
Well, speaking of the informant, when a confidential informant first arrives at the police station, in this case Mohammed Shahade, he first arrives at the Boynton Beach Police Department, I want you to assume as truthful that there was an initial 2 to 3 hour interview conducted by members of Boynton Beach PD and Mohammed Shahade, and it was not recorded. Do you have a problem with that?
Should have been recorded. And
why should that 2 to 3 hour conversation have been recorded?
It's important to get the facts, the allegations that have been being brought to the law enforcement's attention. You need to know what background this person has with the person that they're talking about. If there's been a romantic relationship, you want to know more about that. You want to know why you're bringing this to the attention now. What benefit do you have? What are you trying to do? Things of this nature. You want to be probative in your interview with the person. You want to know if this is actual or is this just being a vindictive situation, in other words, where a person is trying to get back at the person for whatever they have done to them.
Yeah, but why is it important to have that recorded, though?
Well, it's important to record it. Number one is it memorializes the statements that are there. And number two, a lot of times you find that people will change their story from time to time, and then that's important. And again, based upon my previous testimony, it's important that the state's attorney know what was going on from the very beginning of this case, and so that they can give the legal direction as to what should be done from there as well.
Let's talk a little bit more about if there had been state attorney involvement. Based on your 30 years of experience, would there have been some way for the state attorney to find out an address right away if they had a phone number of Dalia Dippolito?
Well, law enforcement, you have resources. Working in narcotics, those who have worked in narcotics would know that you could do utilities checks. If you find out where a person lives, you can find utility checks, so you can get that information as to who's living there, who owns that, what utilities are in whose name. You can do other information. If you have a phone number, you can get search warrants, telephonic search warrants to get that information as well. So there is a whole lot of things that can be done. The attorneys are there to assist you with that. You get a judge who's on call, or if it's off hours, if the judge may be during business hours, you get a judge to sign off on telephonic search warrant and get that information as well.
Do you believe that it is good police practices for a police department such as Boynton Beach PD to post any type of footage at all of an undercover sting operation on an alleged murder for hire plot while the investigation is still pending?
Posted where?
On YouTube.
No, I wouldn't. Procedurally, that's not correct.
Why would you not want to do that?
Number one, you're compromising the prosecution aspect of the case. You don't put an investigation, ongoing investigation, something at this level on YouTube. Ethically, you just don't do that.
Based on your 30 years of experience with the Los Angeles Police Department, if you truly believed that a suspect was going to kill her husband, would you arrest that suspect?
If I have proof that they were going to do that, yes, you would be arrested.
And if you didn't have reliable proof, would you arrest the suspect?
Well, again, that's why you have a state's attorney there. You would be guided by what they say. Number one, your job is to protect and to serve, to prevent any injury or death from anyone. And if there's a reason to believe that this person, then you have this, if there's probable cause to believe that you have enough to make an arrest, then that you on that as well.
Well, if you as a detective on an undercover sting operation believed that a suspect such as Dalia Dippolito intended on killing her husband, would you want to know her whereabouts?
I would know her whereabouts. I would cause an investigation to be done to corroborate that. Again, you have to corroborate or verify to confirm that these allegations are in fact correct.
Well, you also want to know where she's going, right?
You want to know where she's going. You may want to put her in surveillance. You want to know her whereabouts. If she has a habit of doing certain things at certain times, you want to be sure that that's covered.
One final area I want to talk about is this 45-minute encounter at a Chili's restaurant that took place between Mohammed Shahade and Dalia Dippolito before she went and met with a gentleman named Witty Jean. Are you with me?
I'm with you.
All right. Now, I want you to assume that Captain Bonifaire and former Sergeant Ramsey of the Boynton Beach PD testified that they had heard that there was a malfunction with the wiring of Mohammed Shahade. If it's further proven as truthful in this case that there is no maintenance log and there's been no evidence at all in this case of a malfunction other than what Bonifaire and Ramsey had heard, would you be critical of that explanation?
Well, if the wire was not working, the meeting should not have been had. If the wire was working, then there should be some recorded documentation on that, and it should have been memorialized and turned over.
So that's a good point. I forgot to mention that. So assume truthfully that, let's assume for a moment that there was a malfunction. Should Shahade have gone into Chili's restaurant with Dalia Dippolito?
No.
And why not?
You don't know what Mohammed is telling the defendant, what the defendant is telling Mohammed. If maybe some coercion going on Mohammed's part to push the defendant to continue in this process, and you need to know that, number one. Number two, that you have to manage this type of operation. There needs to be law enforcement operatives in the location. I'm not going to get into details of undercover operations, but I'm just giving you a little topical observation so that you would know that there should be some visual observation of the principals that are involved there, and also the recording, just for their safety and your safety and the safety of the patrons that are in there.
You mentioned visual observation. Shouldn't the Boynton Beach Police Department have had at least one or two undercover officers inside the Chili's restaurant?
I would have had two.
Okay, now I want to ask you to assume another fact is truthful. I want you to assume that Mohammed Shahade walks out of the Chili's restaurant and he immediately encounters two Boynton Beach police officers, and they tell him a version of what they heard inside the restaurant about Dalia Dippolito ordering food for lunch and ordering some food for her husband, Mike Dippolito, to go. Are you with me?
I'm with you.
Wouldn't that signal in your mind that that encounter was recorded?
It would.
And if, in fact, it's proven as truthful in this case that there was a recording of the encounter with Mohammed Shahade and Dalia Dippolito in the Chili's restaurant, the 45-minute encounter, if we're able to prove as truthful in this case that it was recorded, then wouldn't the Boynton Beach PD have an affirmative obligation to turn over that recording to us?
They would.
And if the Boynton Beach PD has not turned over the recording that it took place in the Chili's restaurant between Shahade and Dalia Dippolito, is there any type of, in your 30 years of experience?
Yes.
Yeah. Assuming that there was an audio recording of the encounter at the Chili's between Mohammed Shahade and Dalia Dippolito, and further assuming as truthful that the Boynton Beach PD has never turned over the audio recording of that 45-minute encounter, based on your 30 years experience with the LAPD, would you be able to draw any type of inference from the failure to turn over that audio?
Failure to turn that information over is critical. Number one, there could be some exculpatory information in that tape. When I say exculpatory, I mean information that would benefit the defendant, as well as inculpatory information that would have a tendency to show the defendant was involved in something. So it's important. It works both sides, and it should have been turned over to the prosecution, and then the prosecution should turn it over to the defense, so they could have a full record of what happened during that 45-minute meeting at Chili's.
Right, because you want to eliminate any kind of speculation, right?
That's correct.
Because you want to preserve the integrity of the investigation, right?
That is correct.
Because you don't want to compromise the investigation, right?
That's correct.
And you don't ever want to have a conviction of somebody where there might have been a discussion that took place that's not recorded that might indicate that a suspect or a defendant is not guilty. True?
True.
Mr. Williams, based on what you've reviewed in this case and based on assuming the truthfulness of the information that I've articulated in my previous questions, wouldn't the facts of this case suggest to you or rise to a level of egregious misconduct by the Boynton Beach PD?
Based upon the lack of turning over tapes that were allegedly recorded, the failure to do the basic things as it relates to doing a thorough investigation, in my opinion, it would be egregious.
And that would compromise the investigation?
It would compromise the investigation.
Thank you for your time, sir.
Sure.
Cross-examination.
Good morning.
Never met before, have we?
We have not.
All right, to be a good detective, you never want to assume facts is true, right? You don't go in assuming things are true.
You go in there and investigate.
Right. You want to talk to everybody that has potential information, right?
That is correct.
You want, not only do you want to talk to everybody, you want to then gather all the evidence that's available to you.
That is correct.
You want to go behind the scenes, and you want to gather more evidence, cell phone records, GPS, anything else that verifies what people are telling you, so you can tell what the story really is.
As it relates to the case, yes.
All right, so all these things that you assume here today, if the assumptions are wrong, does that make your conclusions garbage?
Well, it's for the jury to make a determination on.
Well, if the assumptions are wrong, aren't your conclusions not good?
Overruled.
My assumptions that are based upon the questions I asked are correct and the standard as it relates to doing investigations.
And if the facts that you assumed are wrong, your conclusions are no good, aren't they?
Well, the facts are wrong that were posed to me, then my conclusions would be wrong in that aspect of it.
All right, so you told the jury you were really concerned about the fact that they didn't interview Muhammad Shahadi on July 31st, 2009, right? They didn't record that.
That is correct.
They did, didn't they? In fact, you reviewed it. On July 31st, 2009, they took a several-hour interview of Muhammad Shahadi right after they talked to him the first time, didn't they?
Yes.
And all those things that you told the jury you were concerned about, when they asked him about all those questions in that recorded interview, didn't they?
There was a sergeant, I think Sheridan, who said that the interview was not recorded.
No, you misunderstand. They talked to him initially for 2 hours. Then they turned on the recorder and talked to him again in more detail about what they talked to him the first 2 hours. You listened to that recording, didn't you?
I didn't listen to that recording. No, I didn't.
Oh, that would have been really important, though, for someone to provide that to you so you could listen to it.
I didn't listen to that recording.
All right. That's really important evidence for you, right? If they did record it?
Again, I would have problems with them recording, taking a statement, and turning around an hour and a half, 2 hours later, and then recording what they have already did. I would have problems with that.
Okay. You agree that every single investigation that's done in this country by any law enforcement agency is conducted differently, and they're all subjective based on who the person is investigating?
I would agree with that.
There is no investigation that's going to be the same, and anybody can criticize another person's investigation. Anybody can be an armchair quarterback.
Anybody can have their assessment on that, on an investigation. I agree with that.
We have different officers, right?
Different officers?
Different experience from those officers?
Well, I know you have to look at their training.
Different training and different life experiences, the way they were raised.
How you were raised has nothing to do with your investigation.
Really? So
Let me finish. Let me finish. You talk about your core values there. You bring your core values into your investigation where you treat people with decently and with respect. Those are your core values. You will bring that. That's the issues of training that they received from their from their own. But as it relates to their investigation, they are trained to do certain types of investigations. They're trained to bring certain tools to the investigation, and that wasn't exercised as I observed it in this case.
You have different facts in every case.
Every case has different facts.
Different crimes in every case.
Every case has different facts.
Different witnesses in every case.
That is correct.
Different evidence in every case.
That is correct.
Different issues in every case.
That is correct.
Different times in every case.
What do you mean by times?
What year it happened.
That's correct.
There's different suspects in every case.
That's correct.
I could keep going on and on. Everything's different, right?
That is correct.
How many solicitation to commit murder cases have you been the lead detective on?
I haven't.
You reviewed a lot of evidence in the case, right?
When you say evidence, what do you mean by evidence?
Review all videotapes?
I have not.
You didn't review those?
I have not.
Judge, can we approach?
Yes.
From August 1st, 2009, between Mr. Shahade and the defendant?
I saw a video. That's what I saw.
What was the video?
I think she was in the vehicle.
And was she with Muhammad Shahade?
She was with a male. I'm not familiar with what Muhammad Shahade looks like.
Video, was she handing over money? Was she counting out cash and handing over photographs?
I didn't get that far into the video. It was hard for me to hear in the video.
Did you review the video where she was in the car with Woody Jean?
I saw that.
Saw that whole thing?
I didn't see the whole thing. I saw a majority of it. Again, the audio was hard to understand from what I was looking at.
I know you mentioned in your declaration that we received that there were Mr. Muhammad Shahade contacted Ms. Dippolito between August 1st and August 5th of 2009 more than 500 times. He telephoned her, right?
Yeah, that was a miss. That was not correct.
How is that not correct?
Because again, the way the phone records were looked at, it was about 30 times. It was.
So you looked at those?
I did not look at the phone records.
Why not?
I didn't receive the phone records to look at them.
So you just assumed that was true?
I was told that, and then I was informed that was incorrect information.
You're dead wrong.
I was wrong with that.
And on those calls, the 30 calls, how many actually did they communicate?
What do you mean? How many did they communicate?
Well, because the seconds are on there. If it has 0 seconds, is that a call?
I did not listen to those calls.
No, I know you didn't listen to them, but on the call record, it shows how long the call actually was.
I didn't.
When I dial it, it starts counting. Whether someone picks up or not, it counts seconds while the phone's ringing.
I'm familiar with phone records, but I have not looked at those phone records.
How much are you getting paid to testify here in total?
I'm getting paid for my time is $3.25, not paid for my testimony. $3.25 an hour.
Did you review on the call August 1st, 2009 with Mr. Shahade, did you review on there when he was returning to Point Beach Police Department and he said why he was actually cooperating with police?
I did not review that, no.
Would it matter what he... Well, if he said, why are you cooperating with the police? I'm going to be able to sleep knowing that someone is going to get killed. I have to get it off my chest. Would that be completely contrary to what you're telling this jury?
No. Again, you would cause the investigation to be done to make sure that those facts are in fact correct.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Redirect.
A couple of questions. Mr. Williams, isn't it quite possible that because the Point Beach Police Department threatened to prosecute
Mr. Muhammad Shahadi unless he cooperated that he might be making a comment like that?
If he was threatened with that, yes.
He's going to want to do whatever the police department wants him to do, correct?
Based upon that, yes.
And let's talk about armchair quarterbacking. We're not armchair quarterbacking in this case, are we?
No.
In fact, there is one rule that's universal to police officers nationwide in an undercover investigation, and that is they are required to audio record each and every phone call between a confidential informant and a suspect. Isn't that true?
That is correct.
And that didn't take place here. That didn't take place in this investigation, did it?
No, it did not.
And because of that, this investigation is compromised, correct?
In my
And
opinion.
because of that, the evidence in this case is tainted, right?
In my opinion.
And because of that, the evidence in this case is contaminated, correct?
In my opinion.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Williams, you may step down. Okay, I'm going to ask the jury to step back in the jury room for just a couple of minutes. We'll bring you right back out. I apologize for the delay. Counsel may be seated. Other than Ms. Dippolito, are there any other witnesses the defense intends to call?
Your Honor, we're still contemplating Ms. Dippolito, but other than Ms. Dippolito, no.
Oh, but that's my question.
Yeah.
Okay, other than Ms. Dippolito, is there anyone else? Are we at a point now to have the colloquy with respect to testifying or not testifying, or you need a couple of minutes?
I need a couple minutes.
Okay, how long do you want to consult?
Pardon?
How long would you like to consult with your client?
Maybe 5 minutes, Your Honor.
Okay, we'll be in recess for 5 minutes. We'll come back out and have the call.